Welcome to the Misophonia podcast. This is episode 20. My name is Adil Ahmad, and I have misophonia. This week I'm bringing conversation ahead with Heidi Bennett, a coach for creative professionals and a fellow podcaster, host of the Vibrant Visionaries podcast. Her links are in the show notes, and we also mention them during the show. We obviously talk about her experiences. She has less childhood memories of miso, but lots of experience dealing with miso in her adult life, and has some great insight on approaching people in restaurants and workplaces, as well as mindfulness techniques that she uses. I know most folks are still in quarantine, so I hope everyone is healthy first, and second, that they're in a good place misophonically, and that anyone else in the house is not driving them insane. Please share your quarantine miso stories on social if you have any. We're on Instagram and Facebook at Misophonia Podcast, and on Twitter at Misophonia Show. Well, here goes my conversation with Heidi. Heidi, welcome to the podcast. Good to have you.
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me on and throwing the idea out there to just basically invite anybody with this affliction, so to speak, to join you on these conversations. Exactly what it is.
And I'm excited to have a fellow podcaster. You're the, I think, first more experienced podcaster than I am. So you want to, I guess, tell people why don't we jump in and tell people what you do and where you're located?
Sure. So I'm presently in Oakland, California, and I'm a California girl. So I grew up in Southern California. I lived in the foothills of California, lived a long time in Sacramento, California, and been in Oakland, actually, in the East Bay for about 15 years or so.
Why don't you tell me about your current misophonia situation? What's bothering you currently these days? Like, how's your life?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's been fascinating listening to your previous guests. I'm quite a bit older than they have been. I'm actually going to be 53 in February. Mm-hmm. I don't recall a childhood of sound traumas like a lot of people do. I recall a family of learning, the way that you eat and act at the table. It wasn't like extremely formal, but it was, you chew with your mouth closed. There wasn't a lot of like hitting your teeth on a fork, things like that. So I don't have trigger memories of childhood around the table issues. Today I was listening to your third or fourth episode and was thinking about that kind of a thing and thought, in junior high, I remember a friend who had new braces, and I won't go into great detail, but she was eating an egg salad sandwich, and it's still fresh in my memory how absolutely repulsive that was.
Gotcha. Yeah, we can imagine.
Yeah, so it was really, and so a little bit of my background, I'm a singer. I'm not currently in any bands, but I've performed live on stage, recorded music with people, been submersed in music and grew up listening to a lot of music. My parents always had, records playing, and so I've always been around music and singing, and my aunts are singers. And then I also used to manage a lot of coffee houses. So like my 20s and 30s was a lot of coffee house management. And I was always the kind of person who wanted to be in control of the environment. And so what I'm thinking about that is like, I want to set a mood or a tone for people in a coffee house. I want the music to be at just the right volume, or, to have clear paths for people to walk from one spot to the other. So, that like design of how a room works is really important to me. And so now I'm sort of connecting the dots that there is something about not just audio triggers, but like visual triggers. And I remember even the last coffee house I worked at, which was about 15 years ago, I remember my employer was putting signage up. So we had paper menus, but she was putting like she had somebody go out and hand paint this beautiful menu signage that was going to go up inside the cafe. And instead of it being where it would traditionally be in most places, which would be behind the counter, behind the employees up on the wall, so that, as you walk up to the counter, you would see that menu and be able to, talk to the employee. And she had decided to put the menu to the right on a different wall, which would be very difficult to turn crane your head to the right and order, and then turn you'd have to like look and then sort of memorize. So this isn't an audio thing, but what I'm recognizing is I think I do have some real sensitivities to like visual stuff and the audio stuff, because when I walked in as a customer that day, I wasn't working and they'd put the signs up. I started crying and I didn't understand, now I understand that I feel like I have more of an empathetic response to things, that something in my brain, whether it feels rational or sounds rational to anybody else, doesn't really matter. We're having our own experiences, our emotional responses, is that I just started crying because I didn't understand why somebody would be so illogical as to put that sign up to the right, where it would be difficult for every single person to turn their head, look at the menu, and then turn back. And so audio-wise, I'm lucky in that a lot of things that traditionally misophonia people do respond to in an emotional fashion don't seem to trigger me too much. I've worked in restaurants, I've worked in music, but I think I've had an extra sensitivity. I definitely have, like if I'm hearing somebody stirring a spoon in a mug, the clink, that is extremely not repulsive, but just distracting. And as an adult and a married woman now with my husband, I realized he doesn't drive me nuts. But when we go out and do things, like when you have a partner, they're kind of a mirror of your experiences, or, you're reflecting on like your choices that maybe you're used to doing, things that you've learned to kind of compensate or figure out on your own. Like when you're with a partner, you kind of go, oh, I can't be in this restaurant. And they're like, well, why? Like, because this person way across the room has decided that they think it's a great idea to replay a football broadcast or something, or, they're playing a video, or their kid is playing a game. And it's like, it's certain frequencies, it's certain tinniness, it's certain, and it's way across the room. And I've become a professional coach for creatives, and also taken training in compassion. So I've learned about compassion and like how to help yourself with mindfulness and compassion, deal with some of this stuff. And so what I've recognized and what I wanted to share with our listeners is like, I've noticed that, yes, there are a lot of different ways we can advocate for ourselves compassionately, and like put in earbuds, or, do things that will, headphones or whatever things, or remove ourselves or whatever things to help minimize these responses. But there's another thing you can do, which is you can advocate if it feels doable. You can advocate for yourself in the room, and sometimes it feels riskier or like a little more embarrassing, but it's okay to, and I have gone over to someone's table and said, you know what, I really want to, just sit and enjoy a meal with my friend here, and I can't because all I can hear is your video that you're playing. So could you put on headphones or turn off the sound? And, most of the time people say, oh, no problem. I thought I had it turned down to the lowest volume. Yeah. And I'll say, you know what, I have really ridiculously, irritatingly good hearing, and that's how I just kind of leave it at that. And, yeah. And most people are fine with it. I have had some people go, oh, hey, I'm just, kind of give me pushback. And I'll say, you know what, it's a bummer, because we're all here at this restaurant, and all I can hear is the thing you've decided is the most important thing to view and listen to. Yet other times I will just leave, And some of my favorite restaurants, I've actually told the management, but as far as places that I've worked, I've always been an advocate for creating that nice environment. So I'll say, oh, hey, let's when we're talking about policies, let's have, listen to your headphones, or if you get a phone call, take it outside, turn your phones on mute. Those are the kind of things that it's not just for misophonia folk, it's for anybody. But I realize now that I have that, that extra ear for these kinds of experiences.
Right. No, that's interesting. Sound sensitivities in the workplace has become a big issue. Also, in the past year, people have gone laid off because of it. People are wondering, how should I approach my workplace about accommodations? Yeah, it's interesting how yeah, it's a great way to approach it with someone at a restaurant. How do you make that initial step, like in a workplace? Like, do you talk to the HR person, your boss,
Well,
coworkers, try to get a mutiny?
yeah, it's interesting because, like I said, let's just say pretty much most places I worked were coffee houses.
Oh,
And
gotcha. Yep.
most of the sounds were not irritating to me, except for, like I said, that little spoon tink.
Yeah.
But, I'd hear it and just be like, huh, well, that's sort of irritating. Let me concentrate on something else. It wouldn't drive me to madness. So mostly it wasn't an issue. And also, like I said, without really knowing it, there has always been this being through the history of places I've worked, I've always risen to the management position, and I've always been the person that
Oh, so you can kind of set the policy
was the setting the
proactively.
policies and
Yeah.
setting the parameters. And when I ran coffee houses before the rampantness of smartphones, it was really just the music, and then maybe there'd be somebody being kind of loud and speaking, but if somebody's eating, the thing I remember about working at a place is being frustrated by and irritated with somebody's voice, which of course, anything that I say here, anybody in the world can have any voice they want, and no shame to have any kind of voice you want, of course. This is just like how I was recognizing that I was irritated by this person, as they were an adult woman and had a very breathy, what I would consider like a child voice. And but also they were very indecisive, and so the combination of this sort of baby-ish voice with a very indecisive personality was super irritating to me.
Yeah.
Because I just think, dude, you come here every few days. Like, we have the same stuff. Like, just freaking figure it out.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
there
yeah.
was something in me that was very judgmental of that voice. Now as an adult, and now, like I said, after really learning about compassion, and just like a real quick description of it is compassion. It's a common word that we use, we think of like in a positive light, is that you can be, empathetic or, kind to people. You want to be compassionate. But compassion is recognizing suffering. So when you're being compassionate to someone, you're thinking like, oh, I'm recognizing their suffering. Maybe they've lost a loved one, or maybe they're not feeling well, or they just had a breakup, or they just, somebody just bangs into something, something as simple as that is like, ooh, ouch, I bet that hurt. We kind of naturally know what that feeling is like. So it's usually easy for people to be empathetic or have compassion for others and recognize their suffering, and reach out to them or say, I'm sorry you're feeling that way, or I'm sorry you're going through this. The thing I've noticed the most, and what I work with a lot in my coaching clients, is how recognizing our own suffering and then figuring out how to help ourselves. And so a lot of things that I've noticed coping wise that have helped me is just going, oh, I'm suffering right now. Like, this is very uncomfortable. What now? What do I do? There's some choices I can make. What seems like a good solution here? And it could be a variety of things, but that's helped me learn now, and then for myself how to check in. So it's a lot of mindfulness. It's meditating in the morning, but it's also just the simple checking in. And going, what do I need right now? Like before getting on the phone call with you, I was like, okay, so we're
Mm-hmm.
talking in the afternoon. It'd be good to have a little food beforehand, have a
Right.
little coffee. That is going to be my recipe for success. And I have nothing scheduled after this, so I can be relaxed. This is checking in and helping you feel better about life, and be not harried or hurried and
Yeah, and that's interesting. And then
comfortable.
yeah, and I can see how I mean, that checking in could just hopefully train your brain to when it's starting to approach that fight or flight rage, that you have that tool there that you can kind of like check in on yourself and calm yourself down.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that's really nice about it, what that I've, a lot of people say, talk about, oh, self-care, self-care, we need to take care of ourselves. And that's just sort of like a buzzy thing that a lot of people talk about. But the way that I sort of talk about self-care in coaching or on my podcast, which is called Vibrant Visionaries, and I talk with creative people about process and projects and just their life as creatives. But we also end up talking about burnout and self-care a lot, because a lot of us just do a lot of different creative things, and a lot of us work for ourselves, and we get burnt out just by the nature of just
Yeah.
doing a lot of stuff. And especially if you're like neurodivergent, if you've got sensitivities to things, sometimes I even think of it as like a social anxiety. Sometimes for me too, it's even heightened. Like right now, I'm premenstrual, so it's
Mhm.
even more heightened. All of this like response to sounds or other things, where part of me wants to hide, part of me wants to,
Yeah.
just like respond, just like to everything. It's just like um, but so self-care is like not just recognizing that you're suffering, but being okay with it, and like being kind to yourself about it. Like, oh, instead of being like, why do I have this, or why, why me, or oh, or feeling embarrassed about it, right? Like my husband has ADD, and so I need to be sensitive to things for him, and then he's learned about my some of my sensitivities, especially like biting nails. It's hilarious because even like slightly bites one fingernail while we're
Yeah.
watching TV, he can feel me breathing differently. Like
Yeah.
I don't even have to shoot him a look. He'll just go, "Oh, sorry, I've just," and with him, there's challenges around here, his neurodiversity, and that's a thing I've noticed with my clients too. Is like we're working really hard, we're working for ourselves. We have creative whims that might keep us up until 4 a.m. or something like
Hmm.
that. So to take care of yourself, part of it is checking in, but part of it is saying, what, I think today is a nap day, or I had a bunch of things I needed to do. Let me do the one thing that kind of has to get done today. But I'm also just going to like go into a room where I listen to like a soothing podcast or soothing music, or curl up in something very warm and soft and comfy, and like just take care of myself and not worry about getting so many things done. So
Right.
that's a thing that I think is super important for us, because we're so used to like hustle culture, and saying yes to things, or that being rewarded for like kicking ass and taking names, that it can be counterintuitive to go, oh, I just need downtime. But especially when we're sensitive to sound, and living here in Oakland and living in the area like you described, like this right off of High Street.
Pretty industrial and all.
Oh,
You never know what you're
industrial.
gonna hear.
Oh my God.
Get the BART overhead and everything. Yeah.
Exactly. It can be, right now it's very quiet in my neighborhood, but it can be very loud. So some days I say I literally cannot leave the house, and that's the best thing I can do for myself.
Yeah. Have you in your coaching and in your podcast, have you have you dealt with like misophones basically, or has it been other issues that you've been dealing with, helping people with? Does anyone
Um,
happen to have misophonia?
Anybody that happened to have, mostly what I found is people that I coach will have something either, like I said, ADD is pretty common,
Mm-hmm.
or some amount of diagnosed depression, things like that. But there is at least one person that another artist who I talked with on the podcast, and we didn't know that word when we were talking, but we were
Mm,
both talking about him moving from San Francisco up into the foothills
mm-hmm.
and saying, part of the reason is is because it's just so much quieter. And we both talked about the social anxiety of sometimes going to restaurants and having to turn around and leave, or just
Yeah.
being like enraged. And then it was, I think, fairly soon after recording that my husband said, what's the name of that podcast? It's something Hertz,
Yeah,
HERTZ,
20,000 hertz. Yeah, it keeps showing
20,000
up on
Hertz.
Google. Right, right, right. Mm-hmm.
So they have an episode about misophonia. And
Yeah,
he said, you might want to listen to this. I think this is going to blow your mind.
yeah.
And he said, but forewarned, and I haven't listened to it since then, but he'll say, but he's also almost gonna say spoiler alert, but spoiler alert, but no, trigger warning. They do make some sounds on that episode
Right.
that can be triggering, but knowing that, I listened to it and I said, oh yeah, this is definitely me. So this is just within this last year. This was in 2019, I think.
Yeah, I met Josh. I think Josh Furtis was on there. He was at the convention in Denver
Gotcha.
recently. Yeah, I heard about that one. But yeah, they do make sounds, which that's kind of what you end up getting whenever Miss Funny hits the media, is like yeah, you're lucky if you don't get somebody. This
It's
is
a
very
bummer. It's
101,
a
and then they
bummer.
start throwing the
Yeah.
sounds in there.
Yeah,
So
and in fact, I mean that's been a whole thing that I think would be an interesting database to put together, is like podcasts that are generally misophonia friendly
mm-hmm,
versus
mm-hmm.
ones that definitely aren't. Because I also, yeah, like my foray into listening to podcasts were pretty basic conversations, like you and I are having today, but with between comedians, just yucking it up and talking about their life, their projects, and everything, which really is what inspired me to do my podcast. There wasn't all the sound design and like somebody. I've noticed that like I get triggered by when somebody starts talking and they haven't been introduced. So there's that NPR man on the street style, where
Oh
it's like
yeah,
somebody
yeah.
comes in and says, today we're going to talk about blah, blah, blah. And then somebody starts talking, blah, 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 blah. And then you go, that's Jeannie Smith. No, don't tell me afterwards. Tell me beforehand. Like, give me
Mm-hmm,
context for who I'm listening to.
mm-hmm,
And that I've noticed bugs the crap out of me, and like to the point where I can't listen to them because
mm-hmm.
I don't know what's going on. And like I said with my husband, he and I, would like say it's the evening and we're hanging out. It used to be, and he doesn't do this anymore, is that he'd turn on YouTube and just like start playing something. And I go, wait, stop. And he'd go, what? I go, I don't know what we're watching. Like, I don't know what this is. It a trailer? Is it something somebody told you was funny? Like, I need to know what this is before we start watching it. And I don't know if that's misophonia or not, but it's definitely something I've realized is like important. And what I've noticed with my family, which I know that's a common subject you talk about, is once I figured it out, I did send out an email to everybody. And my
Mm.
family's always very supportive of things, and a lot of creative and kind and nice people. And so it just kind of it kind of set the tone for me saying, so as a family gathering goes on, if I decide to go in the other room and like lie down or put my headphones on,
Yeah.
that's why. And everybody's like, oh, cool, and my brother, he's definitely realized that he has misophonia too. And
Okay.
so we've realized that. Again, I don't recall any gnarly things in childhood, but we've played music together and we've collaborated creatively over the years. But I would notice, like a few years ago, I remember having a phone, being at his house and talking on my phone and kind of like walking around, different rooms and talking on my phone. And he walked in and was like giving me the signal of like, you're talking really loud. And I was like, oh, sorry, And, but over time he's recognized like, oh yeah, like certain, if the fan is turned up too loud for me, that's something. If I walk into a room and the fan is at a weird frequency, that's all I can hear. Or like I said, the nail biting. Oh, nail biting is one of the big triggers for me. But my brother, and then, I'm not here to diagnose anybody, but my nephew, he's 5, and he does commonly will say, that's too loud, and he'll just say it, which is great. Kids are so, like, they're just right in the moment.
No filter.
No filter. And he's just like, that's too loud. And even when we were talking about taking the ferry, them visiting from Sacramento and taking the ferry over from the East Bay over to San Francisco, which can be really fun event or fun, day, go over there and take the ferry. And he said, that sounds like something loud. And I said, yeah, it can be with the, like the foghorn or whatever,
Yeah.
Wah, wah. And he goes, I don't want to do that. That sounds loud. That sounds scary. And I was like, oh, that's great. So, whether he has misophonia or not, he's definitely very much comfortable advocating for his comfort, which I think is great.
And what do his parents say? They're cool. They're accommodating.
Oh yeah, totally. Like they did actually come down that day, the day that we had scheduled to do it, but we just hung out and went to lunch and played at a park instead.
You just found out what the name was in the last year. Is that when your brother found out too, when you sent that email?
I don't remember. I just know that like just recently we were talking because we were at an event and walking around, and he said, I got to leave this area. It's too loud. And I said, yeah, I definitely, now that I know what misophonia is, I definitely know like, oh yeah, I just need to move out of this because this is too loud. He goes, yeah, I definitely have that too. I definitely have sound sensitivities, and it really can be, irritating. Like, that makes sense to me.
Are his triggers kind of similar to yours, or is it just kind of like that loud sounds or sensitivity to?
We haven't had like a full conversation about it, so I don't have his. I don't have a list of his.
Yeah, no, it's always been fast because as you've heard the other podcasts, like there's always like, well, no, not there's always, but there have been. I've been surprised at how many cases of like siblings, people with misophonia have siblings that have misophonia too. So I was just curious if there's another data point here, but sounds like that's an emerging story.
Yes.
So and okay, so what do you so other than you do that's really interesting. A lot of people, most people I talk to are doing the earbuds and leaving a room, which I'm sure you do a lot of that. You do a lot of that as well, but you have this mindfulness practice, which I think, more people should be doing that in general. But I can definitely see how it help here. You haven't gone to like you haven't tried to get it like gone to an audiologist or anybody to try to get it, I don't know, looked at listened or diagnosed maybe from a medical perspective or.
No, what's anybody going to tell me?
Exactly.
Something I already know, right? I mean, I had some ear pain a while back when I was a singing instructor, and luckily that has dissipated.
Yeah. How was being a singing instructor, and obviously having been annoyed by certain voices, I was wondering. Did any of your students kind of set you off?
Luckily, no. I think, whatever my strain is or whatever.
Right.
The thing that gets me with voices mostly, or mouths in general, is the mouth smacking. That is the thing. And so if I'm listening to a podcast where there's moisty mouth sounds, mouth smacking, and I've noticed. In fact, I was just watching a YouTube video yesterday of someone on Bon Appetit. They have a
Oh
test
yeah,
kitchen.
the
Okay, have
KQ,
you? Yeah.
the KQD, where they review the restaurants. Oh no, that's
No, this
check
is
check. Right, Bon
this
Appetit. Okay,
is
yeah,
Bon Appetit. There, so the magazine Bon Appetit, they have
yeah,
a test kitchen, of course, and
right.
they've made these. They've kind of blown up recently as having these really fun
Mm.
YouTube
Mm-hmm.
channel, and there's no. I mean, I would say no, 90%, 99%. I have not heard anything that's triggered me.
Yeah.
There's nobody like smacking their lips that I've noticed. But I, so also that, there's editing involved obviously in these. So whoever is editing this stuff does a great job with the sound editing. But one of the guys that's one of the test kitchen hosts slash, he's an editor and a food recipe tester. He just said, I have that thing where I cannot stand hearing people eating, and a little thing
Okay.
popped up, a little visual, popped up
Yeah.
and said he has misophonia. I was like, oh, cool.
Oh,
And there's some
interesting.
podcasters I've listened to, like on. Do you ever listen to How Did This Get Made?
Yeah, yeah. I've heard some of those. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I would say 2 out of the 3 of them have it. But the
Mm.
funny thing is, the third person, I have heard him on other podcasts eating on mic, and he has been given so much ration of crap for doing
Yeah.
it, and he does not care at all. And, I
Okay.
think he's just like, I'm a comedian. This is what I'm doing. I don't care. Don't be so sensitive. But the
Right.
other 2 people, they haven't said the words misophonia, but they've both had like,
Clearly have it. Yeah.
the way, you just hear people and you kind of go, oh, yeah, that's a thing. So what was your question?
Oh, just right. Hey, we're going on a tangent. That's. I think it
Yeah.
was. I was really. I think I was asking. About singers. Your students.
Yeah, so singers,
And then
I
we started
don't.
talking about voices, and then you talked about
Yeah, there
Bon
is
Appetit.
like
Yeah.
I do have a thing with music, but whether it's misophonia or not, that's the thing is like once you start looking down, going down the rabbit hole, it could be anything. But like I am a music lover and I love a lot of music, but it has to have a certain sense of rhythm that makes sense to my body. And the way I can say is like it makes sense rhythmically to me. It makes sense in that I could move to it. I don't have to be able to dance to it, but like your body just like right now I'm just sort of like swaying back and forth a little bit. My shoulders are moving. That kind of music, like rhythm and blues and soul and dance music, that to me is like kind of at a regular kind of average dance, swaying your hips motion
Yeah.
makes sense to me. But my husband, like I said, he has ADD. He has like certain music he likes to listen to that will get him in the zone while he's working
Mm-hmm.
or driving, and that music is like industrial or like electronic and stuff like that. He loves a variety of music too, but that kind of music, if it's a certain amount of repetitiveness and a certain amount of speed, that to me would make me like hyperventilate, like I
Mm-hmm.
cannot listen to it. And he knows that. We've been together for like, we're getting up on to 15 years now. He knows that, so he
Yeah.
doesn't even listen, or he'll kind of start sensing if he's got his music playing on random and he's driving and I'm listening. He'll be like, this sounds like a no-go for you. And I'm like, uh-huh. And he'll just switch to the next song. So more that than listening to somebody sing.
I'm surprised by how many partners have been. Well, maybe I shouldn't be surprised, but the support that people are getting from people around them. That's been. I was expecting to hear more more interviews turn into big rants where everyone hates me, but because there's a lot of the ranting that you kind of see online. But it's great that the people who seem to be willing to come on the podcast and talk about it are very well. Great communicators, good at advocating for themselves, in tune with themselves, and I think this is a good inspiration for people who are listening who just might be just finding out about it, maybe young, maybe confused. So this is great to hear. And
Yeah,
mhm.
that's a huge part of working with my clients is that I talk with them about, whoever you are is okay. And whatever you think and feel is fine. And it's normal for you. However you process the world is normal for you, and that's fine. And however you're going to, as a coach for people, I'm helping people figure out how to navigate life and how to make life work for them. And it's not so much like finding the perfect like productivity system. It's usually figuring out just how the rhythm of your way of being in the world is, and not thinking it has to be like anybody else's. And so I think that's the same thing. Like, also, I think there's been such a huge movement to make people to destigmatize mental health and mental illness and all that. And also because of the internet, as many things can be negative about it, there's so many positive things. And I think part of it is something like a podcast like yours here, where you're getting to hear other people's experiences and start to go, oh, I understand. It doesn't mean you have to. And that's the thing. So with empathy and with compassion, you don't have to like go, oh, I get it, I'm the same. You could just say, oh, I understand you more because I'm hearing your story. And so I think people out there just like sharing more intimacy and more about their story, and more saying like, this is who I am, and that's just it, like it helps everybody else feel a little bit better about being themselves, whatever that means. And that doesn't mean we can't make improvements or learn processes or ways of navigating in the world that help us feel better, or happier or more comfortable, or even for other people to feel better and comfortable. And it's being curious and open and talking it out, and sort of, like you said, advocating for yourself, and being patient with other people as they kind of figure out your proclivities as well, and just like, that's the thing with anything in life, is like, just because you tell everybody once that this is what's going on with you doesn't mean that we're all going to magically know how to be around you. But
Right.
Over time we can gain these awarenesses about each other and be a little more sensitive to each other and stuff. And I think that's what's great about learning about all sorts of people through watching different YouTube channels or movies or TV, or more just celebrities or up and comers or anybody in between
Yeah.
that are sharing their lives. Is like, it starts to um, show us all how a little bit different we all are from each other, and then some of the things that we have in common. And both of those things can be beneficial to all of us.
Yeah, I like that line you said earlier. This is who I am, and that's just it. I think that should be the quote for this. One of the many quotes from this podcast. But is there any, as we kind of like wrap up? Is there? You said a lot. Is there any
Yeah,
other little
no.
good? I don't know, like epiphanies or tips you'd like to kind of share with people on who are hungry to cope, and more from
Yeah.
maybe that kind of mental aspect.
Okay, so what are the things that have really helped me? So one of them, I think, is like, be a scientist, conduct your own experiments and sort of learn what works for you best. And
Mm-hmm.
it might take a while to figure that out, as far as like headphones or listening to certain things, or, it's going to be individual, right, for you. So just always be curious and figure out what works for you. And then the second thing is, mindfulness, the very simplest. It doesn't have to be like a whole 10-point meditation program or anything. But to me, just being mindful means, without judgment, sitting with yourself and checking in and saying, what do I need in this moment? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So saying, what do I need in this moment? There's no like, what do I need to get my crap together? What do I need to get out of this? Like, just without judgment means just like ask with no preconceived notion of what the answer is going to be. So like,
Yeah.
what do I need in this moment? And just seeing what happens, seeing what answer comes up. It might surprise you, but then listen to that and try to give yourself that. And sometimes that means like asking for some help or asking for somebody to, like you might need to say, I really need to have a conversation with you about my needs. And I feel a little uncomfortable about it. It feels vulnerable, but if you could just sit and listen, I need to talk with you about my misophonia or about anything, right? This mindfulness thing is for your whole life, for everything.
Yeah, right. Cool.
Yeah, so I think that's the main thing is like be kind to yourself, advocate for yourself. And then, sometimes the best answer is to just like leave the area if it feels unsafe, or it's totally okay to just be like, this is not working for me.
Yeah,
and
just do a Forrest Gump
away.
And get out. Yeah,
totally,
right.
Just gump it.
Well, on the note of gumping it, it's been great to have you. Great talking to you, Heidi. Have you on the podcast? I don't put this in show notes, but do you want to tell people like how they can kind of get in contact with you?
Absolutely. So my podcast again is Vibrant Visionaries, conversations with clever, compassionate, multi-creative professionals about their projects, process, and lessons learned along the way. So it's me talking with filmmakers and cartoonists and musicians and comedians and just a whole variety of creative people. So that's at vibrantvisionaries.com. I do believe it's very misophonia friendly too. I meticulously cut out mouth smacks and I edit it myself. So
yes, I've heard some of I've heard some of it, and I can attest to that. It's
cool.
It's totally fine to listen to.
Yeah, so vibrantvisionaries.com, and then if you're curious about like the coaching or the mindfulness and all that stuff, that's at HeidiBennett.com. So it's HeidiBennett.com, HeidiBennett.com. And my social links are through those too. So if you like to follow me on Instagram or Twitter, you can find those at HeidiBennett.com and vibrantvisionaries.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that, and thanks for the conversation, and good luck with your struggle.
No, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate the resource, and I'm learning a lot. And
cool. Well, thanks again, Heidi.
Awesome. Thanks, Adil.
Thanks for listening again. I hope you're taking advantage of all this solitary time at home and staying healthy. Or if you're listening to this in the future when you're commuting to work, congratulations on surviving coronavirus. Until next week, wishing you peace and quiet.